I'm gonna try this YouTube thing. Seen enough people doing it, figured it's my turn. Might as well join some of the interesting things being shown online. So, debut project for this whole YouTube channel thing is gonna be the rebuild of a Dynakit ST70 chassis. It's an old stereo tube amp, 35 watts per channel, push-pull, and very popular. Not too hard to come by these days, but they pull in a pretty good price. Oh, I don't know, 8 years ago, something like that, I got a hold of this chassis and this preamp board out of this Stereo 70. And as you can see, especially with some of the transformer guts sprayed all over it, it was a poor dead ST70 that was turned into a parts chassis. So I'm going to rebuild it and bring it back to life. When I was looking around online for parts for this thing, especially the transformers, since it's very obviously devoid of transformers, I ran across a couple of these boards. This is the VTA preamp board. If you go to tubesforhifi.com, he makes a couple of these boards. You can buy them PCBs like I did, you can buy them parts kits, or you can buy them assembled. The blue one here uses 6 SN7 octal tubes. The green one uses 12 AU7 nonal 9-pin miniature tubes. So I'm going to use these boards, and I bought both of them to try and experiment with, to put a new board in this chassis, because the original board uses 7199, I believe it is. Yeah, 7199 tubes that are a triode and pentode, and they're getting hard to find. I just picked up a couple of thousand tubes. Lots of 12 AU7s, 12 AT7s, 6 SN7s, a lot of the standard triodes. So far, after checking probably close to 1,000 tubes out of it, only one 7199 that I've run across in the whole batch so far. So these tubes are getting expensive if you can find them, so I'm going to go with one of those. But while I was searching around, I also, for transformers and things like that, I found those tubes, but I also found, power transformer, but also found another group that does a full kit. There's a couple of different places that do them, so I went ahead and bought a full kit from a place called Triode Electronics. They were one of the places that had transformers. About 3 places. There was Dynakit parts, where I bought that power transformer. There was Triode, where I bought this kit, and then Edcore and Hammond had close ones. So I actually bought 2 Edcore output transformers, which are going to go with that power transformer. But while I was looking around and everything else, I found this kit, and for basically, less than $200 more than just the 3 transformers there, they sent all of the hardware and a brand new manufacturer stainless steel chassis. So rebuild that chassis, basically kit build this new chassis. A couple of things I like about this new chassis are, if you look down here on the front, if I can hold this up, you can see here the old one had these big plugs for the preamp, and so you could plug a preamp into here, mainly like a phono stage or something like that, into here, and do all the preamp work. Also, the inputs were on the front. There's mono stereo selector, I'm not going to use this in mono mode. This one just has the 2 inputs. But what I'm thinking is I can put the power switch, instead of it being on the back, and a mute switch on this, because I want to use this one as my main computer desk speaker amp. This one I'm going to set back to pretty close to stock. It won't be completely stock because I'll be using the VTA board. And there's a couple other small differences, but fairly close to stock. So, but bought this kit. Sent a bunch of hardware, tube sockets, screws, but they also sent the full complement, including the choke that goes underneath here. These transformers look really nice. In fact, this power transformer has a bit more iron than the Dynakit parts one. So there's the Dynakit parts.com. Here is Triad Electronics. As you can see, thicker stack. Dynakit parts had the bottom bell, but that's under the chassis, so not a big deal. But the Triad one actually had what feels like Teflon wires, and they appear to be like a plated. They're stranded from looking at them, but they're not as flexy as these ones. So I like these wires better, and it's got a much thicker stack. They come out to about the same spec. So I actually like this transformer better, but since these 3 are all matching, I'm probably going to put them into the closer to stock and then use the Dynakit transformer in the custom along with the EdCore transformers, because I want to give the EdCore brand transformers. Those take a while, so they're not quite here yet. So I think I'm going to start building up the stock one first, and then sit on this one, and then when the parts start coming in, or when the transformers come in, start putting this one together. But there are some things I want to do. Like I said, I want to put power switches in the front of it. Something else that I also want to do is so I kit up all the parts, capacitors, resistors, things like that, just to make it easier. So I got 2 power switches for the front, but I also got a couple of power switches, or not power, but a couple of single pole, triple throw outputs. So instead of doing what the stock one does here, where there's common and then you connect your speaker to which is the correct impedance, my plan on this chassis is to put the input back here instead of the front, because it's going to be on a desk, then have 2 speaker terminals, and then have this switch over here on the edge. I'll have to put a new hole in, and have it where you use the switch to select your impedance. And it's got a real short throw on the switch. I don't know if you can see it here, but really short throw, like maybe a 1/4 inch. And put that here so you can select your output impedance for the speaker terminals instead of having 3 separate speaker terminals. So that's what I'm going to do on the back here. This one also comes with fuse holder and an IEC plug, so your standard grounded computer cord style plug on the back of there. And then one other thing I think I'm going to do on here, and I haven't decided if I'm going to try and do it on the stock one, is in the stock package, if you're building this to stock specs, the original bias has 2 bias controls here, one that biases one channel and one that biases the other. Well, these VTA boards instead have bias pots for each of the tubes to set the bias on each tube. So I'm not going to use these bias pots because the board already has it. What I think I might do is put in jacks here, something kind of like this. I'll have to, again, widen the holes, but do bias points like that, so I'm not going to have to not going to have to open up the chassis to get to the bottom of the tubes to check the bias on each tube. The stock one I'll run the EL34s, which were what was originally in this design, but this one, which will be my daily driver, I think I might try some different tube types. I'll have to look and see, make sure the pinout of something like a 7029 or 7027 is the same, but I know there's a bunch of people that'll do things like they'll run KT66s or something bigger and heavier to get a little more oomph out of these things. So try different tubes here, have the bias points, basically measurement points, brought out to the top side, so I can just plug in a meter and bias it, instead of having to pull the bottom chassis off and clip leads underneath while this thing is sitting up on its side. But normally this is where those bias pots would go, and these two, and then I think these would normally be bias points in this chassis, or measurement points in this chassis with the two pots, so you can measure it topside. In the original, you wouldn't have that. Over here you have your two where your pots go. You know, these would screw in a place like that, and there's two of them, and then you would actually have your capacitor here. But since I'm not using the big can capacitors, because they don't really make can capacitors, you can get some, you know, basically remanufacturers for a lot more than what the capacitors themselves cost. But I'm not going to do that because there's nothing for here, and this is the original chassis, so it's already got the hole, but I'll probably just put a plate over this and mount all the capacitors under here where the bias circuitry used to be, because that's all moved to this. But yeah, that's the plan right now. So I don't know if I'll try and bring bias points out to this. I don't really want to drill or cut on this one. The original bias points for measuring were actually up here on the front. You can see one of the pins was used for the bias set, so I'll probably use that pin and the one next to it, or the one opposite, something like that, to bring them out, and just use the original sockets on the front like they did on this one to be able to read the bias on these with the new individual tube bias board, the VTA board. So that's the plan. Build these all up. Like I said, probably clean this one. You can see this is a very dirty. Clean this one up, start building this one first, since I have all three of the triode transformers, and then see about using the other kind of piecemeal transformers on this one for trying new things. But got a lot of cleaning to do. Got to strip this down. These sockets are in decent shape. They're usable shape. The triode kit sent 5 new ones for this. So I don't know if I'm going to use these on this chassis. I probably will, since there's 5, might as well. But I don't know what I'm going to do with the ones on this chassis yet. I might just add 3 more that I have in and leave these ones here. I might swap them all out and do new, but either way I got to strip them down, take them out, clean this chassis, get a bunch of the old transformer goo and whatnot off of them. You can see here the choke in this thing had a bad day. The original, you know, would have been one of these down here, and it looks to me like the capacitor went bad, drew a bunch of heavy current through the choke, and cooked its guts right on out. So that's my guess on why this one, knowing about this much of it, on why this one was written off and then turned into a parts chassis, because capacitor went out, took the choke out with it. Looks like it might have even stressed out the power transformer a bit, since there's off-gassing from there. Either way, it was left to run, get way too hot. Iron died. When you got dead iron, you have a parts chassis. So we'll see. I'm going to go clean this up now, and then bring you back when we get to building those boards. So a couple of other things I wanted to point out. While I said I like the triode transformer better at external look, because it's got I like the type of wire better, and it's got a thicker laminate stack. The Dynakit power transformer overall looks like a nice transformer also, and they also sent this wiring diagram, so they got all the dimensions and all the different color wires on here. So both provide all this kind of information, and like I said, the Dynakit has the Dynakitparts.com transformer has the metal bottom versus just having the open paper bottom. So wanted to mention that. So they'll both be perfectly good, perfectly serviceable transformers. They both have overrated filament windings, so you can run fatter tubes, ones that need a little bit more current, so for their filaments. So there's nothing wrong with that. Both will do a good job. And the Dynakit one was like $25 less until you had added in shipping. And then basically it was all out in the wash. The other thing I wanted to point out is this is the chassis from Triode. It's a stainless steel chassis. It looks very good. But to match this one, I went ahead and bought just a bottom to match this chassis because I don't have a bottom for it. And one of the things is this chassis is, as you can see, very shiny. In fact, there's my ceiling fan. So much like this chassis, when it's not covered in years of grime and dead transformer goo, it's actually a very shiny nickel plating. So this one actually, even though it's also just stainless, it's very similar to this one in being shiny on the outside. It is just regular old stainless, but it's actually polished on the outside. So it's it'll actually match that one very nicely. And it came with a little short rubber feet. So just wanted to mention those couple of things. Oh, also, Dynakitparts.com has covers. So this is, yeah, these are aftermarket covers that match the original style of the original covers that go on these chassis. So I have the original brown with the correct Dynakit Stereo 70 logo on the way, but they also make a black one with just Dynakit. So I went ahead and got this one to see what it's like. My plan is to put this black one on the Triode, the daily driver, and then have a more correct original one for the stock one. So that should be coming in with some tube sockets and a couple other things like the original style input jacks for the front of this, you know, the original chassis. Those should all be coming in hopefully within a week or so, and I can put them in while I'm building this up. But just wanted to point out some of these other things that came along with it, like new covers. So here we are, a couple of days later. I've buffed out the chassis just a little bit, brightened it up because it was pretty nasty. Mounted the transformers, mounted some capacitors underneath. So we got the main filter caps down here. So the next step is going to be basically putting in all the tube sockets, putting in the switches, so power down here, stereo mono up here, and then starting the wiring. These Triode transformers have incredibly long wires. So this is the main power transformer, and most of these wires are going to need to go about yay far. So we've got plenty of room. So I actually see about reusing, like the green ones here are one of the filament lines. So these go up over here to that tube. Well, I'm going to use whatever I trim off of here to that tube socket to go to the next tube socket, and even come around, you know, to the front tube socket, and if I can reach, even make it all the way to the connections into the board, and just reuse this really nice Teflon coated wire all the way around. Same thing with these brown filament wires that are the same thing but go around the other side. So if I can make them reach, you know, at least reuse the sections to get to here, and if I can, use the last little bit to get to the main board. The black wire here only needs to go about yay far. So a lot of extra to save for other wiring. So tube sockets, wiring come next. I really like these triode transformers. Like I say, the only thing that the other transformer had that this one doesn't is that bottom bell housing that would go over here, but not a big deal at all since it's all under the chassis. So for tube sockets, tuck all this up under here. For tube sockets, the originals were these plastic, they're not Bakelite, I'm guessing they're phenolic or plastic or something sockets with the metal brackets under here, but these ones, there's only 4 of them in this chassis, and I need 7, so there's 3 we're missing. But the other thing is, like, you can tell they've been unsoldered and used. They're chipped around the inside here. They're not bad, they're just, you know, road hard. The triode kit, not that bad, came with 5 tube sockets, which have the metal plate. They don't have the ground lugs on the back, but they have a metal plate for mounting and the 8 normal lugs, and they're more of a like a fork that grabs the pin goes in between, whereas these are more of a socket and the pin goes in the middle. Don't know which is better, which is worse, which is going to last longer. But these are what came in the triode kit, and so far everything in the triode kit's been real high quality, so these should be fine. But there's only 5, too short. So a while back I bought some sockets off of eBay, and looking at them, they're black plastic, so looking at them close, but they're basically the same pin arrangement as these ones from Triode. A little bit different lugs, and they have a different mount. They've got a little ring here, but if I take that and I mount it, or I put it here, it comes right down almost right against the metal. So these should be just fine. So I think I'm just going to use 7 of these, so I've got them all matching, and then I'll save these ones that came with the triode kit for my triode chassis. So that will be the next steps on this. Something to talk about when buffing this chassis out, and it's still nowhere near perfect. There's fingerprints on it, and there was overspray and a little bit of oxidation and stuff. Learned some lessons. Hadn't really had to buff out nickel plating like this before. So the first thing I tried was wiping it down, little WD-40, which didn't do much. So then I took it into the utility sink, and I washed it, and I used some stuff, what's it called? There's like 5 or 6 different brands of this stuff. I think I got one called like Super Clean that's in a squirt bottle. I got one in a small parts washer over here that's called Power Purple or something like that, and they're all the same kind of lye-based degreasers, purple degreasers. And that took a lot of the stuff off. When I first started this, there was transformer goo here, and right here that's not there anymore. Around this choke there was transformer goo sprayed out. A lot of it was real heavy. You can see the poor choke that was here before died a horrible death. It got a real hot supper from a bad capacitor or 6. So it cleaned all of that stuff off, but it didn't really do anything to the finish. It didn't brighten it up, and there's this weird kind of cloudy haze, and that's what I wanted to really clear up. So the degreaser did fine getting the wax and that kind of stuff off, but didn't do anything to brighten up the finish. So I tried a couple of things and was reading online, and the big one that I tried that everybody read about, or that I read that everybody was talking about, was take some like distilled white vinegar like you get at the grocery store, mix that half and half with water, which it's already diluted to 5%, so you're knocking it down to about 2.5% at that point, and then put it on, like spray it on, and let it soak for a little bit, and then wash it off. Well, I didn't have a spray bottle, so I soaked a paper towel in it and put it on, and that was a mistake. Don't do that. I did it over here under where this transformer is, and it left these like crusty white splotches, and it made it even cloudier, and you could see a night and day difference between these two. you know, under this transformer before I mounted everything. This one hadn't been done. This one had been done, and it was bad. It was an absolute mistake. So the short answer is, don't put anything acidic near a nice shiny nickel finish. Bad things happen. So tried a couple other cleaners, you know, like CLR, bathroom cleaner, stuff like that. Nothing really did anything for any of that coating. And what finally actually worked well, I've been watching another YouTuber. He was talking about Simichrome metal polish, and you can't get Simichrome here in the Denver metro area. You'd have to order it online. So instead of waiting a couple of days for Amazon, read a little more, and apparently at the auto part stores there's a couple of things. One's called, let me see if I can grab them real quick. So one's called Mother's Mag and Aluminum Polish. Still haven't tried this one, but everybody said it's basically like Simichrome, but not quite as aggressive. So it's used for polishing, you know, shiny mag wheels and aluminum wheels and stuff like that. So, but it's safe on chrome, it's safe on nickel and all this kind of stuff. So I didn't try that one because while I was reading, they said there's another one very similar, and you can see the fantastic labeling here because I guess it fell off. But this one is one called Blue Magic, also available at local auto parts stores next to the Mothers. It's called Blue Magic. Apparently it was originally developed for aircraft, polishing aircrafts. And one of the things that makes this one different than the others is this one has a little bit of silicone in it. So when you rub it on, it leaves like a silicone film. And a lot of people don't like that. But I actually figured it's not such a bad thing to help keep this thing from corroding and clouding up again. So I used a little bit of this and a microfiber cloth. And I mean, when I say a little, like I used what was stuck to the little seal inside and kind of touched it on here and then polished it out. So barely any. Like touched a little bit there and then what was stuck to the lid, and that was about it. This was already open like that when I bought the stuff. But it really didn't take hardly any at all. Rub it in. Probably took half an hour of rubbing the whole thing down. Not hard, just rubbing. And then it came out, cleaned up most of the spots. Almost all the spots from the stupid vinegar were cleaned up. And then it actually came out a lot brighter and a lot nicer looking. Again, still not perfect. You can kind of see some like years of crud in here. Kind of, I don't know if it shows up on the camera, but kind of speckly. But a couple more hits of that on the outside for whoever ends up with this amp. That'll shine up real nice. But for me, it's a lot better, hell of a lot better than it was. So I'm going to leave it right here, rub it down maybe one more time when I'm done putting it all together, get all the fingerprints off and stuff like that, and go from there. So Blue Magic in the end. So the lye base degreaser to get all the transformer goop from the previous poor transformers that had hot suppers, and then some Blue Magic to brighten it up after that, and then and it left like a silicone finish, like a protective layer of silicone on it, and so that'll help keep it from oxidizing. So that's the game plan going forward with this one. All new sockets in here, and then the transformers are mounted, so I'll start wiring up the sockets, and then I gotta build one of the boards. I'm still waiting on the tube sockets for the new board to come in, the little 9-pins, but I can build up the board in the meantime. So I'll probably do part 2 building up that board.